Really looking forward today. I'm going to test today the PING EYE2, so maybe one of the most classic irons of all time, against the brand new PING G425 iron. I'm going to hit a 9, 7 and a 5 of each club. Now I am expecting these to be longer and so on and so forth, but I'm going to try and present the data in a slightly different way to give you an idea of trying to categorize what is better or worse. Now in the comments down below, will there be an improvement? I mean, we are talking about maybe an iron that was so far ahead of its time, and I do feel sorry for the PING engineers of now having to compete with the legacy that was left for them by Carsten Solheim. This reminds me of the iPhone. Like, has the iPhone really changed over the years? It's got more kind of internal menus more than anything else, and then the hardware changes slightly, but the actual premise of the device is the same, and this feels like that. So are they trying to beat this, or are companies like PING just trying to live up to their legacy? And in irons, can we actually improve? So in the comments down below, what do you reckon? Will we see an improvement? And if so, define in the comments down below, what does that improvement mean to you? I'm going to hit some to start, collect some data, give you some looks and feel ideas, and then we're going to do a little challenge at the end around the data collected, because it's quite an interesting debate where this goes. So first off, let's just look at I've got the two 9 irons here. Definitely it's a very different, more modern shape from the new PING, and I think you see it in these top lines. This one's so much more sticky uppy sharp in the toe compared to the PING. Has this nice rounded kind of more pleasant looks. It's also got the ferrule on it. This does nothing really, it's for show. You see the old one didn't, because this does weigh something. Why have it on? 9 iron soles very similar. Obviously we get a little bit of the old button in the end here we'll do a bit of the tech. I mean, tech on this is just cavity back clever iron, but we'll do a little bit of the tech. If you want full reviews of the G425, I've got other videos which I might put links to. And then if I look at the 7 iron, it's the same thing. The PING EYE2 is much more kind of brittle and aggressive in its angles. So you see it here. So it's like the old PING EYE2s remind me of an old person's foot. Like knuckly and bobbly, like an old kind of hand, an old person's knuckle and foot, where they've definitely tried to get it prettier and more kind of maybe in comparison for what they're competing against nowadays. Because you've got to remember, PING EYE2, I mean, when I played these for a little bit, and then you had some great, I remember Calcavecchia, I think, winning the Open with these clubs, but they were against maybe Mizuno blades at the time, was like the height. And Ben Hogan blades, possibly, if my timing's right. But see what I mean? So this was so revolutionary in its looks that I don't think it was trying to compete with anything. It was trying to change the game. And in the 5 iron, the change of the game really shows. I mean, it's so knobbly and no effort to try and hide offsets or anything like that. And what I love about the old EYE2, you see it really aggressive here, where it's all shaved and kind of much more curved and beautiful here. Much more knobbly up in the high toe area. Look how they've rounded it off, and you really see that when you look down at them. And then we do see soles getting a bit thicker, certainly out in the toe area here over the old to new. So I do love the fact that the EYE2 and PING still are like this way to a certain extent, just maybe not as much. You know, that it was their club. This is how clubs maybe should be made. It wasn't a version of other clubs. Right, let's try the 9 iron to kick us off. So it is really noticeable down in the offset area, and really noticeable up in the high toe area. You got to remember, I played clubs like this, but not for very long. I was so seduced by the looks and feels of blades, you know, and the players I admired at the time were so much more bladey. So I tried this, you know, I wanted to see what the medicine is about, and I loved it at the time, but it just didn't last as long as the bladed obsession. So when I look down at this 9 iron, I do think, like, just, it looks really cool. Like, I absolutely feel like I could play these clubs still now to this day. And we'll show you as the data progresses, is that even an option? Obviously, maybe not, because of custom fit options, those kind of things. Now, if I compare that up to the 9 iron of the G425, I mean, it's just so much more pleasant, and it sits in the marketplace, that one does. Like if you compare the equivalent in a TaylorMade, a Callaway, a Titleist, a Strix, and a, you know, whatever, this is going to blend with them, so it's not going to be so aggressive. Where the EYE2, if they still had this shape, I mean, it would feel like no one's gone forward, so it would feel like there's no progression, and we'll see if there is, obviously, like I say, in the numbers. But also, I just think this would be aggressive in its look, the old EYE2, which would turn some people off. Now, when it comes to feel, sound, the modern one is louder, clippier. The acoustics of the older one, to me, I think are much nicer. It is a much more brittle sound with the new one. Same ideas with the 7i. Someone remarked in a video about it peeling. This isn't peeling, this is from my mat. Pings are so solid in their build. Again, EYE2, it's knobbly and it's bobbly. I don't mind it though, it is what an EYE2 is meant to look like, or what a Ping in my kind of eyes is meant to look like. And the sound is definitely nicer with the EYE2. But again, I do think it's nicer for me, as in what I want an iron to sound like, but then you still get the kind of ideas of friendliness, which we will challenge and look at as the numbers come in. It's close to a more modern bladey feel, this one. It does, it feels superb. And I do honestly, I do think the EYE2, you're looking possibly just at kind of close to iron perfection, apart from people don't want it to look this way. But if you're talking performance feel, I reckon, and it's going to be so interesting to see the numbers, like we are close to just what you can do with this. This was arguably so engineered ahead of its time. Again, the modern 7, the blade length looks longer, even though it's not. That's because of the shaping. It's not as high up in the toe. I prefer the look of the older ones, but you've got to remember I'm pulling on remembering using them. So that's a kind of back in the day statement a little bit for me. And it's the same, crosses over to the 7i, and it feels good, but it's much firmer sounding than the EYE2. I can instantly see the delivery numbers, stroke distances are different, but I'm expecting that. What that actually means to a player, obviously, we can talk about as we do our challenge at the end. Is it really going to be any better than a club that's, God, how much older? Posting the car, I don't know how much. Are we talking 20 years older, maybe more? I don't know without looking up the actual dates of release. In the comments, do you know how much older is the EYE2 than this one that was released basically this year? Now, if we go up to the 5i, and what's really interesting is you don't get a progression so much, which you do so much more in modern clubs. And what I mean by that is this 5i, and there's no real difference in its looks, of friendliness, of blade lengths, it feels, than the 9i. And if anything, the 9i feels bigger because you see more of the face. So it's not that I don't think they got onto their progression ideas yet with this one. And often as I test different lofted irons that have got the same number on the bottom, the biggest thing that stands out is when you start losing launch. So you reach your launch threshold. The thicker clubs with the different center of gravities that do push the ball up but drop the spin down, they do have benefits by giving you a degree or so, or 2 yards extra height on the peak heights, which changes the land angle. Again, the 5i from the EYE2 just feels, it's much closer a modern blade than it is a modern cavity. Not a bad hit, a little bit out of the bottom, but not bad at all. And that would hit most greens. Now this is where I do feel like we're really parting the ways. The 5-iron is now so different in here, up here, compared to this one. When you look down at the two blades as well in gaming position, or the two clubs in gaming position, you really start to notice how much straighter and smoother, almost like a hybrid feel in this one. With this one, like I say, still feels exactly like the 9-iron. Goes thinner here, fatter here, big kink. This one feels almost like we've got more love now in what a 5-iron needs for most golfers from the new one. Where the old one, it was just one idea throughout all clubs. So I do think one of the biggest changes would be progression. Progressive CGs, progressive launch, progressive shaping, blade lengths. And it's just something that they hadn't got onto back then. And again, it's really quite loud now, compared to I2. It's much more rocket feeling off this one. I can see the numbers, it's strong. I mean, the loft presented there is like boom, I can see the distance it's going. So I think looks and feel, we got a more modern in the ilk of what it's competing against. Look, if that's more functional or not. I think it does become more functional as we get to the longer irons, but only marginally possibly. I honestly think more people would like the feel of the old one compared to the new. And I think it's an interesting trend where Ping have put ferrules on and smoothed off lines and what have you, as an acceptance of trying to compete in a marketplace, where I2 felt a little bit more like we're going to change the marketplace and we're not going to compete, people are going to have to compete with us. And it did get to a stage with that club where you just couldn't get them. You know, they were so hard to order, the demand of that club was so big, and I do think it was just like it's our way or the highway, where this one feels more of a compromise between maybe how much more competitive it is out there now, and I think that shapes the shape of the club and what it's trying to deliver to the student, which is interesting in itself, isn't it? Let's look at these numbers. We've got two ways to present it, a normal way that you'll know, and a new way that might make you think differently about what actually is better. So let's start with the carries. You can see the I2 is getting over or under 200 carries. Very tight dispersion, where the 5-iron in the 425 is hitting over 200. You know, we are seeing a real parting of distance there. We see a bit of it in the 7s as well. You can see the modern 7 is going nearly kind of 190-ish, where the old I2 7-iron is just under the 175 carries. And then the 9-iron relatively close, much smaller difference in those 150 to kind of 145 at the most. So you can see, as I felt the progression, I think, in the club, you can see the progression as the distance stroke launch is trying to help. So I think this is one of the best slides for showing you maybe how modern clubs have pushed on and are really aiming at your kind of weaker side. Your 9-irons, apart from lofts being crazy, are going to be not that dissimilar. 8-irons, then 7-irons a fraction more, 6-irons up to 5-irons for us. That's where you're going to start to see that bigger gap. And then a very common pattern in the spins, which you'd expect from the slightly lower lofted or the lower lofted G425s. It's higher spin in 9 to the other 9, and it's higher spin in the I2 7 to the 7 of the G425. And again, in the 5-iron, lower spinning in the G425, but that's going to be the loft delivered. There's less loft being delivered with all three of those G425s. And then this is quite interesting. The launch angle is very similar with the 9-irons on the old and new. The 7-irons a little bit higher, but you can see the lower lofted club is doing well to try and keep up with the launches of the older iron. Then in the 5-iron, what's really interesting is how tight the launches are. Look at the standard deviation of the 5-iron in the G425, but the average launch angle is trying to keep up. So you've got not as tight launches, but you are getting it up there. And I think this is also another pattern we might play on as we show the next data set. I want to just finish before we go into the game, the battle at the end here between the two. Look at this data set. Now, what we're doing with this data is we're seeing how many balls are falling down by the mean, the average, that kind of clubbing number I would hit. So if you think about what you're hitting your 7-iron, think of that as your 0 line, or how far you hit that 9-iron. Obviously in golf, the more I can hit that 0 line, the more I'm going to hit my target. I'm just going to have to change club as I go. And there's a slightly noticeable pattern between the two. Now, so with the 9-iron, if anything, the 425 got more nearer the mean, even though it was slightly tighter with the I2, but more dots around that 0 point, so more getting like pin eye right on my number. If we look at the 7-iron, now the I2 slightly sneaks it. The 7-iron of the G425, nothing really getting to that mean. We get our average, but we've got short and long dotting around, where the I2 7-iron definitely more dotting around that 0 point. Now if we go to the 5-iron, again, a few more outliers, maybe slightly tighter with the 5-iron in the 425, which is interesting, the modern club, but very similar dotted around the mean. If anything, I would say the 425 has slightly got it. So if you take pure distance away and actually look at where those balls are landing, it gets really hard to actually see what is better and what is worse. So I'm going to do a fun little game to finish before we summarize what we're thinking about here. I'm going to hit these irons to their number, and let's see which one gets the better average from the pin. Because at the end of the day, an iron needs to hit target. It needs to hit a certain direction and exact distance for us to be able to score better. Just sending it further has its advantages, but if none of those further shots are actually hitting that mean that you're playing to, so if you're in a 7-iron 150 but none of them hit 150, you're always short, you're always long, golf's going to be pretty hard. Challenge time. And who do you reckon from that data is going to win the challenges? So I've got a 9-iron, a 7-iron, and a 5-iron. I'm going to hit their distances. So I'm not going to pitch a 9 against a 9. And yes, I could do a 9 against an 8, and we could do that in another video. But I want you to think more maybe about your irons being clubs that hit exact distances, and you need ones that do that the best. Now, if you're competing an 8 against a 9, it's the same club, arguably, until possibly we get to the lower lofts, and then we need that help, which we'll discuss a bit more. So I am at the 18th at Celtic Manor, Ryder Cup venue, 2010 course, and I've got 145 to the pin. So I'm going to hit the eye2 first, I'm going to hit a series of shots, and then I'll compare it up to 155-ish distance, about 150 distance with the G425, and I think you'll see how they start parting in distance as well, because these are quite close in the 9-irons. Which was going to hit closer out of the 3 sets of clubs? What do you reckon? Post in the comments down below. So you don't want to be short on this hole. So this is right on the money. It's like the number of this club. Take that. Just slightly pulled the last one there, but it's a safer approach to this hole. So I've moved to 150 G425 9-iron. So I've had to move 5 yards back to make kind of equivalent swings. Right, last one with the 425. Bit off the bottom. You up? Go! Yes, let's look which one is closer then. So first thing to note, I only really needed a 5-yard difference in gap. I reckon I could have pushed the G425 maybe 10 yards further, but they were very equivalent feelings of swing. So you can see ball speed obviously matched because we're trying to go the same distance. See the launch comes down in the modern club, spin drops down. Descent angle's actually better with the old because it's launching higher, spinning more. And we're average, look how close they are. So 6.2 average, or standard deviation was 6.2 with the old iron, and the standard deviation was 11.9 with the new, which is what we saw in the data set slightly, but it's small amounts, averaging 18 foot 1 inch, 18 foot 11 inches. You might want the extra distance, whatever that means, because obviously I always think it's quite interesting. Think about a 9-iron going 5 yards further. Does that make you better? Well, it's going to be too much club, and then it's going to be too little, and same with the other one. It's going to fit slots day in, day out. If there is a massive difference in them, but you sustain your numbers, I would see. But it's like this is basically between the 9 and 8 iron of the old set. So I can't see how that's an improvement, or how the old one is just really good. Right, we're now 175, old ping. So now we're going to start branching off a little bit, possibly, not sure. Definitely we should see a few more missed greens. This is a tough green to hit at this angle. Get up. Take that. Is that going to fly on that line? No, get up. Oh, first missed green. So G425 7-iron, we've gone to 187. So now we are really seeing a bit of a parting in the distances of the equivalent irons from obviously the design aspect of launches and spins and the lot stronger loft. Longer doesn't mean better, remember. Longer just means it goes further. It's just a different way of getting there possibly. Oh, that is my most erratic shot. That's not even hitting the bunker. Ouch. Right, last one, and I can see which one's going to be better unless something dramatic happens with a hold shot. So you're seeing the pattern as well of lefts and rights with the two clubs. So these are red dot to black dot, that could be playing its part. They're patterns I would learn as I game them more. So we're now 118 ball to 121 more ball, launch slightly higher with the old EYE2 to slightly lower. Peak height high with the old to new, obviously those lofts 172 to 185, but we're 12 yards compared to 18. Again, the old one is closer at its distance, and then we see the spin nearly 1,000, well, just under 1,000 revs more. Obviously as well, think about this, I'm comparing a 7-iron in effect to a 6-iron, so the modern club has a harder task, but we're talking about years and years of development here. And now this isn't the single out ping. The reason I'm singling out ping A is because I've got the EYE2s, and B because I just think that club is so far ahead of what golf clubs were doing at that time compared to what golf clubs are trying to do now with different lofts. I think it opens more interesting ideas. Post in the comments down below if you want to see me test in a different way. You want to see me test the 7-iron to the 6-iron and the ping, because there's definitely winnings and losing. I'm not saying one is better or worse than the other, but at the moment the pattern of the dry ball data is playing through, isn't it? It's, yes, the new ones are longer because they're different lofts, but I'm definitely a little bit tighter with the old ones, but I should be. It's a club less possibly. Because the other way of thinking about this, look at these two data sets here and think, take away the fact that I was just hitting to that very tough green to hit. Just imagine this is down a range. You're buying this. You're buying the 185 7-iron over the 172 possibly. Do you see what I mean? So if you take these down a range and don't put them in situation, is that one of the biggest differences, that you're all getting fit, or lots of you are getting fit in this situation nowadays, where the launch monitor tells us how far it goes and we dial into that. You can see in that situation, you would all use the EYE2 every time, you know, at the distance. But on a dry range, those numbers, the modern one is showing much better, isn't it? If you're thinking 7-iron to 7-iron. And yes, obviously I know 6-iron to 7-iron, we can do that in another test if we want to. This is more an idea of what clubs hit to that mean more often, what clubs hit that 0 line more often. That's what you need from your irons. Now this will be interesting. So this is the 5-iron EYE2, and we are now set at 195, where the 7-iron in the G425, so modern, was set at 187. So now these two are bleeding, aren't they? So we'll hit these and we'll compare 5-iron to 5-iron, but we'll also compare this 5-iron to that 7-iron possibly. Could be an interesting one to look at also, because that will get an idea more of the 6 to the 7 kind of comparison. So 5-iron ping EYE2, all sit down. So it's going to run over the back. This is such a well-designed green. I've played this hole, and the layup is no easier really than going for it if you get the chance. Just I was never really quite long enough to get many chances of going for it. See, I think this can compete with the 7-iron, I really do, of the modern club. And that's just 5 pretty solid shots. One I think was the bunker, was it? But like, they're neat. I want to compare that to the 7-iron of the modern. Yeah, look at that, 11 yards compared to 18 yards with the 7-iron of the modern. 185 average carry to 193. And look at that, I mean, look at the old one, you've got a standard deviation of 4, standard deviation of 2. Again, it's the tightness of these. I literally, the 5 on the modern 5-iron is going to now, because it's getting so much further, just not going to compete, is it? So we're now at 220 yards, and from 220 yards, even though it's got 5 written on the bottom, I don't think I can hit it as close as I've just hit that one, because we're just so much further back. Go! It's definitely louder, this one. Stay left and go. Stay left. Oh, it's got to be up the left side, struck like that. I mean, from 220 yards, if you take that onto a flat green, not set at this angle, like most UK courses, that's just finishing quite close. a hole this punishing really shows up how important tightness of dispersion is. There we go, that's the shot, left of the pin, just middle of the green, now sit, that's the shot, isn't it? So I've pushed that. Have I got away with a good strike push? Go, yeah I have. Go, sit, oh big bounce. So I got away with the big, the push, but a good strike, and again that's where the benefit of this possibly could be. And again, that's just a nice shot. Let's look at the data. I think you can see defining what's better or worse is not as simple as many think. So I didn't change clubs here for these two, unfortunately, because I tend to do that. So you can see the jumping, look, here's the first five, 190, 190, 94, 95, 207, 2010 to 214. So we averaged 11 yards away with a standard deviation of 2. From this 5 iron, and we averaged 11 yards away, standard deviation of 2 on carry, 11 foot, 1 inch standard deviation from 11 yards from the old, where the new was tighter. I mean, it's so hard to choose what is better and worse here, and I think the pattern that keeps coming out for me, the more I do old v new ideas, depending on what you're comparing to, down near here is making no real difference. Like it's minuscule, and this was so far ahead of its time. But you get up near where you're pushing my loft away, the 5 irons and 4 irons for other people, 3 irons, then you do start really seeing a benefit, which is where I think a combo set of irons might be like your better play, which lots of people do. And I've said this before in other videos, you should be, if you can, fitting your irons per iron, not a 6 iron and you buy your set, or 7 iron test, buy a set. We need to push these manufacturers to give you the chance to test iron for iron. And I know there's cost issues and time issues on fittings, which is, you know, fittings are generally built around a selling premise. There's a certain profit margin in clubs, and if that's not enough to spend 2 hours with you fitting each club, then that's a business model that makes the morals of fitting questionable, which is another video. What is better? Are they better that they go further? Is new and old better? I think this was just way ahead of its time. I really do. Post comments down below. And I think we see benefits when we start taking loft off, but when you actually try and hit a club a distance over and over again, there's a good argument that the old might have been better at doing that. In the comments down below, what does better mean to you?